Have you ever wanted your own TV show? Have you dreamed of showcasing your talent for the world to see? Well, now you can. Have your own TV show. You can have your own 30-minute show. Not only will you be seen in the Detroit area, but you can be viewed worldwide. Be seen on WHPR Detroit Live, Comcast Cable Channel 91, on the web at tv33whpr.com, with the TV33 app, on Roku, Google TV, Apple TV, and on Amazon Fire TV. Act now. Time slots are limited. Sign up today and get a free replay with the purchase of your time slot. For more information, call 313-868-6612. Visit our studios and receive a free TV interview to promote your business, church, or organization by appointment only.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
I plan to stay drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
I pledge to be drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
About my guest today, Dr. Jim Gregg. How are you, Dr. Gregg?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
Good. The Detroit Native Sun is the sponsor of this show, and today Dr. Gregg is going to tell us something about chiropractic care. So, Dr. Gregg, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Well, I've been in practice for many, many years. We have an office in Garden City and one in Troy. We've been able to treat thousands and thousands of patients through those particular years, including many, many famous people, many of our athletes, our Pistons. I was the doctor for the Palace for quite a long time, and also took care of the Lions. So I've taken care of many, many athletes at a very, very high level, and the problems, believe it or not, are no different than those of the average individual. And that's what we'll talk about today.
Yes, there's a photograph on your wall as well. And who is that person that's on the wall?
It's Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yes,
and
Arnold
you remember
Schwarzenegger.
that.
I remember that. I remember that, as well as myself. You take care of myself as well.
Yes.
And I'm excited to be with you. So let's talk about chiropractic care. What is chiropractic care?
Well, I think the best way to explain it, Sharon, would be start out with what really bothers. Well, really, how do people get into trouble with health problems? It's a question I'm asked many, many times. And when it really comes down to it, and you think about it today, there's a scenario that occurs in homes all across the country. And we'll start with a word called symptom. And it's the word symptom is usually what takes us to see a doctor or take medication or whatever. But if we define it, a symptom is nothing more than an indicator, a warning, a sign that there's something wrong with our body. The most common one, the most aggravating one, of course, is the word pain. And when people have pain, what do they want most? They want relief.
Right.
And that word relief is the one that gets more people in trouble than more than any other word I know. Now, if we take that word relief and we were to break it down, relief is nothing more than a reduction, or a temporary reduction, if you will, in pain and discomfort that we actually express inside of our body by taking some form of medication. But again, it is a temporary reduction. The problem with most of us today is where we get into trouble is not understanding this. We must ask ourselves the question of which we never do, and that is pain really our problem? Or is it what's causing the pain is the problem? And that's really where we go wrong. When we have pain, we will take just about anything to get rid of that pain. And many of the medications, even over-the-counter medications, work very well. The chemicals in them, of course, will deaden the pain, and when you don't feel the pain, you think everything's okay. So you continue on doing the same thing, and the pain comes back. And then, of course, we take it again because it worked pretty well the first time. And this time, it doesn't seem to quite work as well, so we take a little bit more. So instead of 2, we take 3. And we will continue down that particular path until all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. And then, of course, we seek out a prescription to get something stronger. And the problem with most of us today is nobody's ever explained to us that when we have various symptoms, sometimes medication is required because, pain can be a terrible, terrible thing to deal with. But if you stop right there, as an awful lot of people do, then you allow what's causing that pain to develop further and further and further in the body. And when it develops further, of course, those symptoms, that pain increases and increases and increases. The problem is we're buying time for the problem to get worse.
Right.
So as time goes on, we get to a point now where nothing works anymore. And now we're faced with surgery.
So, a lot of people have a pinched nerve. What is a pinched nerve and what causes it?
Well, if you look very simply at this is an actual spine. It's made up of 24 to 26 small bones. They're called vertebrae. They're stacked on top of each other. They form something called the spinal column. Now, if you look in between those, you can see these little spongy things. Well, those happen to be the discs that you've perhaps heard so much about.
Right.
Now, if we look a little bit further, this is the actual birth canal, and these are the pelvic bones.
Can you put it up here on the table a little bit?
We can hold it up a little bit like that.
Yeah.
Now, if we look at it, we'll look further, we'll see these little yellow things coming out between those bones. Well, that happens to be the nerves of the body.
Okay.
If we go to the top for a moment, you can see a big, big cord at the top up here. Well, that happens to be the spinal cord.
Okay.
Now, the spinal cord runs all the way through that canal, all the way down here, and you can actually see it coming out the bottom right there.
Okay.
Now, if we turn it back around, we look at it, we see that we nerves, we see the spinal cord, and those are actually hooked up together. But there is one thing missing here, and that is, of course, the one that sits right here. It happens to be called the human brain. Now, the spinal cord and the nerves and the brain are all hooked up together, and when they are hooked up together, we call it a system of the body. We call it the nervous system. Now, if we were to look up and find out what does the nervous system actually do inside your body, if you use your phone and you go to Google and you look it up, and this is what it'll tell you. It'll tell you that the central nervous system controls all body functions. Not some, but every single function of the human body.
Okay.
Now, if that is the case, think about this. How in the world, so many times people will ask me, how does this thing sitting in my back make all these pieces and parts we call our body work properly? Well, the one thing that is required on the face of this earth for all action to take place is energy. Energy is necessary for every single piece and part of the human body to work properly.
Okay.
Well, where does the energy actually come from? A lot of people think it comes from food. Now, granted, when we take food, we have calories. When they burn calories in the body, of course, it produces energy. But the energy necessary for human function only comes from one part of the human body. It comes from the human brain. But it's got to get from that brain to every single piece and part of you. How does it get there? It takes a beautiful, specific pathway that was created inside of you when you were first conceived. It happens to be called a nervous system. So the impulses from that brain fire through that spinal cord and out over those nerves to every single piece and part of your body every second that you live and breathe. And here's the one thing I want you to know if you never remember another thing. As long as the energy impulses from that brain gets to every single piece and part of your body, uninterfered with and uninterrupted, that means a complete free flow of impulses constantly from the brain to all parts of you, then guess what you have? The one thing that everybody cherishes. It's called health.
So people who have strokes, that's why they lose the function of their arms and legs.
Yes.
Okay.
The damage that occurs in the body is horrendous, but how did they ever get there? That's what we got to go back, and this is the problem. Probably the toughest thing that I face today is what I call the greatest doctor in the world. And you know who the greatest doctor in the world is? The television too. Because if you watch television, there seems to be not an hour that goes by without some kind of medication being sold for some kind of problem, primarily pain.
Okay.
So today, it's very common for people to be taking an enormous amount of pain medication. Because as I said, pain can be a miserable thing.
Yes.
But you've got to stop and think for a moment. You can't just stop there. You must find out what is causing this pain, because if you don't, all you're doing is buying time for the problem to get deeper and hold on to the body, or hold on to the body, I really should say, or getting to a point where you just can't stand it anymore. Then the surgical procedure comes into the picture. But suppose we could have stopped that a long time ago. That's why the spinal examination is so critical. Now, when a bone comes out of position, people will often ask me, well, how does that happen? Well, the bumps and bangs and falls in life, we talk about the various things. Many times when I talk to patients, I'll ask them many times after I've looked at their x-ray, have you had any injuries in your life? Oh, no, doc, I haven't had anything. You sure you haven't been involved in any auto accidents or any falls, maybe down a stair or something like? No. I said, well, what I'd like you to do is when you go home, I want you to think about that a little bit. And when I see you again, let's talk again. It never fails, Sharon. When they come back, they will tell me a list of things that happened to them. Now, when that bone shifts out of position and it blocks one of those nerves, that's what the pinched nerve is that you happen to mention. And when we pinch off a nerve, wherever that nerve is going to, a problem begins to develop. And that problem will develop and develop and develop until someday you're forced to do something about it. And then, of course, we go down that medical merry-go-round road.
So I know that some of the nerves are connected to organs.
Yes, they are.
And a lot of times people think like kidney failure. It so I'm asking you, could it come from maybe a fall and then the nerve is being blocked and now the kidney is starting to have damage to it? Is that correct?
Well, remember one simple thing. The only way that the body controls any single piece and part of it is through the brain. The brain actually controls, but how does it control it? Well, the only connection of the brain to the body is the nervous system.
All right.
And it's just like a computer. This is the computer.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
God made our body so amazing. That is totally amazing.
The beautiful thing is he gave it the opportunity and the ability to heal. But you can't block it. If you block it, it can't heal.
So the nervous system is the key to everything coming from the brain.
That's exactly right. So when we see this situation occurring, what we begin the process of doing is we take that vertebra that is out of position and we begin the process of moving it back toward a normal position.
Right.
And we take the pressure off the nerve.
Right. And I know some people think chiropractic care is, I call it wrestling with people, putting them on the table, you know. I know when I come to you, that's not how it's done. So can you tell people the new way that some of it's being done?
The one thing that we've been able to do through the years, obviously, is develop more and more techniques that are better and easier on the patient. The manual technique that was what we started with, if you will, which I did for many, many years, and still do, by the way, we have now developed a technique in which we actually use a computer to move that bone off that nerve. And all the patient will feel is just a little rapid vibration. But when directed properly, that bone will move away from the nerve. Sometimes when you put a person down and you do a manual type of an adjustment, even those that are necessary, some people are a little afraid of that. And they're afraid because of the noise, even though you explain it to them. And for years itself, I always was faced with that question. Well, now we got a situation in which we don't have to do that anymore. So we actually use the computer to not only find the problem, but to remove it.
Right. So another question, when a baby is conceived and born, does the spinal cord develop first? What develops first, and how does the spinal cord interact
Well,
with
the
that?
brain and spinal cord are actually already formed.
Okay.
Now, it continues to form as time goes on, but one of the things that we talk about many times in the office, we talk about the need for children to be examined. And the youngest child that I ever took care of were actually my own sons. And when my sons were born, both of them were adjusted when they were 2 to 3 minutes old.
Really?
Now, why would we do that? What would
Right.
happen to a spine of an infant being born at that second? It's the powerful uterine muscle contraction. Sometimes can displace it. Remember, with the infant itself, there's not a lot of protection yet. That column hasn't formed really to the point it is with an adult. So when we check them and we adjust them at an early age, it's much easier to correct something like that before they even feel the problem. When you can knock it out then, they don't have to go through the irritation, the aggravation, and the pain that many of us do as adults.
That's interesting. That is interesting. What about athletes? You know, a lot of times parents don't want to take their children to a chiropractor, but tell us how you work with youth. And
Well, it's the best thing that they could ever do, because if you look at most of the athletic sports, of course, you're talking about contact sports. And you're talking about bumps and bangs and falls and crashes. And I mean, they are tough sometimes, especially in the athlete of today. You look at football. I mean, finally, you know, they've been talking about it for quite a while now, but there was a time they never talk about it, and that's concussion that occurs. That's only part of it. But I mean, when you look at the spine, you think about that spine and the impact that it takes when all of a sudden a lineman hits you in the back. These are things that happen at younger children, with younger children, I should say, and all the way through their athletic career. So it's so much easier to detect that and correct it and then just supervise them along the way. You're not going to stop the child, and we really shouldn't stop them from playing sports or whatever, but they do need to be examined quite often. Right. And perhaps some what we call preventative care, so that they can continue to play, but in a healthy state, not a sick state.
Absolutely. Would you give your contact information so people can reach out to you?
Well, we have an office in Garden City, and we have also one in Troy. 525-8422 734 is our main number at the office. You can call that number, and they can actually direct you to whichever office is closest for you.
Give that number again. You said 525?
525-8422 734.
Right. 734.
Yes. 525-8422.
Okay. So tell us what these are.
Well, these are examples of what I was talking about. And if I can hold that up just for a second, I'll show you what we're talking about here. These are the vertebra here, and there is that spongy disc in the middle, and behind it, of course, you see the nerve, and behind that, of course, we see the spinal cord. Now, when that vertebra is subjected to traumas, that bone will shift, and when it shifts out of position and is left there, it may not be blocking a nerve at this particular point, but it begins a really detrimental process. It begins the process of wearing the disc away. Right. The problem is that disc is actually a separator. It's a shock absorber, but it's a separator that keeps the bones separated from each other and from the nerve that sits behind it. So the smaller it gets, the closer that bone gets to that nerve, the more pressure is building. And as it builds, of course, the pain becomes more frequent. So when we find a situation like that, or let's say, for instance, we don't find it for a while in that person's life, then we get a joint that looks like this. So if I can turn it around so they can look at it here, you can see the major difference between the two. Here, you can see that big spongy disc. Now, over here, you can see that that disc is almost worn completely away.
Right.
But look what's happened to the remaining disc.
Right.
It actually squeezes out from underneath the bone right into the opening where the nerve is.
Right. And what is that called, the disc when it closes up like that?
Well, this is called degeneration, but degeneration comes in about four different forms, really.
Degeneration. So there are a lot of people out there who have degenerated discs.
Oh, tremendously.
Right. And then I know you talked about the bones fused together when the disc is degenerated like that.
Well, the way that the body will protect this, if nothing is done, as time goes on, it will take this joint because it's so unstable, and it'll try to stabilize it. Well, how it does is it takes calcium, puts it into the joint,
Yeah, that's
and
what
then as
happened to
time
me.
goes on, you can see these little points sticking out here. Those are spurs, and then pretty soon those spurs attach, and the body then seals it.
Absolutely. Talk about people who have migraines. I know that adjusting assists with the
Especially
migraines.
at the base of the brain. That's
Right.
where we find the most problems itself with migraine headaches. And they are a miserable, miserable thing to have. All headaches are bad, but migraines are severe, and they affect so many parts of the body at the same time.
Absolutely. If you have a question for Dr. Greg, you can call 313-868-0342 or 868-0351 or 868-4336. So he's the specialist here. You really want to find out what's going on. What about people who have had strokes? Do you suggest that they are adjusted often?
Very
Does that
much.
help?
Very, very much. When you stop and look at what happens to the human body, it almost doesn't matter what the end result is. And what I mean by that is we still require, if you will, connection to the best we can from the brain to the body. Well, that nervous system is the connector. If there are problems still existing in it, whether you've had a stroke, a heart attack, it really doesn't matter. You've
Right.
got to try and find a way to correct that, reduce that, allow that impulse to get through. And that's what chiropractic care does.
Absolutely. And we have a new problem that even youth are having, and that's with the telephones, the cell phones. We're constantly doing this.
That's correct.
And so what's going on with our spine?
Well, I talk about it all the time. In fact, we do a program called WorkSafe, and it's a program that we do for manufacturing plants and actually for many companies to show them safe ways to do particular things in the activities of their work. And the reason that's so important itself is because, again, people do not know how to do certain things. As a result, we do most of them wrong.
Right.
And the simple thing, if you really think about it itself and how the human body actually works, one of the worst positions in the world is for a person itself to be bent over from the waist, especially if they're reaching down and picking something up. On average, if you're picking up a 10-pound box, a 10-pound box now, the body's mechanism of 1 to 10 ratio, you pick that box up and you bend forward, do you know how much pressure there is in the lower part of your back? 1,200 pounds.
Really?
Now, a young person without degenerated disc could probably get away with that for a while. But as time goes on, they can't. When we bend and we reach and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we feel this tremendous pain in our back, that's your body telling you. There is a serious issue there.
1,200.
1,200 pounds. But the biggest one is the cell phone. And I teach people every day with a cell phone.
I know.
When you take that cell phone, I got one here in my back
Constantly,
pocket.
we're doing this.
And because that's what we do when we look at, we're reading texts and we're reading all kinds of emails and whatever, but the head is forward. When the head is setting over the shoulders and over the neck area, the head weighs approximately 8 to 12 pounds. You know how much the head weighs when it's all the way down here looking at a cell phone?
No.
60 pounds.
Really?
Now you talk about a 60-pound object being in this particular position, and inside of there is a spinal cord.
So that's the pressure that's put on our spine.
That's
the
correct.
weight of a 60 pounds.
60 pounds. Now you wonder why you see people on computers constantly rubbing their necks.
Right.
They don't have the computer, the monitor in the right spot. Their actual body profile is in the wrong spot. But when you teach them just a few simple things, they can, let's face it, some of them have to do or use computers all day long.
Absolutely.
And if that monitor is here or there or whatever, they're going to pay for it.
Right.
But we teach them how to do certain little simple things. I'll give you another one. How people sleep at night have a tremendous effect on problems in the human body. So many patients, when they come in the office, in fact, one of the first things I will ask them is, what position do you sleep in at night? Quite frequently, you'll hear an individual say, well, I sleep on my stomach. Well, is it a problem to sleep on our stomach? Well, no, if you could breathe like this, but you can't. So what do? We turn our head, and that's how we sleep all night long.
Right.
6 to 8 hours with the head rotated. Well, think about this. Isn't the spine rotating with it? So when we have problems, that type of situation itself makes us 10 times worse. What is the healthiest way to sleep? On your side.
Because the whole body is turned to the side.
But you've also got to have something that'll keep the head in alignment with the spine when we lay it down. You can't have a pillow too big that cocks it up in the air, or one too small that allows it to drop down. So again, these are things we teach people. And just by teaching simple things that they do at work or at home or a combination of both, you'd be amazed at how much better their life is.
And what about people who are 50 and over? What kinds of things should they be doing to adjust to, I guess, the new lifestyle, the way we feel? You know, you don't have to feel 50. You can still feel 30 if you're doing what you're supposed to do. But
yes.
I'm just saying, what are some of the things that what tips would you give us?
Well, we've talked, and you hear people all the time talking about, well, you know, Doc, I went to, you know, and they told me to do these exercises, and I'm doing this or whatever. A lot of the exercises they're doing are making them worse. Now, why would that be? Because exercise is a stress. Well, if we find the problem in the spine and we can correct that particular problem and we can show them how to do the exercise, I should say, a better way,
All right.
and they can still do it without pain, we're home free. But nobody teaches them. They just give them a sheet, do this, do this, do this. You can't necessarily do exercise. I take most of the time when people first come in, I take them off exercise.
You took me off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until I get you stable, and then we put you back on.
And
then we teach you how to do it the right way.
Absolutely. Would you give your contact information for us again?
734-525-8422.
So when a person calls you and come into your office, tell us about the first consultation, because I was very impressed with that when I came.
Well, what we do, very simply, Sharon, we go through a physical examination, obviously. We go through a lot of information from the patient has given us, of course. And then we take the individual and we do an x-ray. And the x-ray is vitally important because it gives us the opportunity to actually see specific problems in the body, especially in that spine. Now, we might find that there are some additional images that might have to be taken care of. We may have to send the individual for an MRI or a CT scan, but that's secondary, and in a lot of cases, we don't have to do that. The X-ray gives us a tremendous amount of information. But the other thing we do, which I think a lot of doctors have stopped doing if they ever did it, is we try to teach people using terminology that people can understand.
Right.
You know, a lot of times we go to a doctor and the doctor talks to us and we leave the office with just about as much
Right.
understanding as we had when we went there. Because we, us doctors, have a tendency to use words and terms that we understand, but people don't.
Right.
We use terminology that everybody understands, so that when you leave the office, you're going to leave with some understanding that's going to make your life a lot better.
You know, what I appreciated most about my exam was that you sat down with my family and we talked about, you showed the X-ray.
Yes.
And you talked about it, and then the orientation as well to explain what chiropractic care is.
Yes.
On Wednesdays. That's
Yes.
when you have that?
Yes, we do what we call a doctor's report. And what it is just a detailed explanation, again, using terms that people understand.
Right.
So that people can truly understand, I have a problem, and that's what I've been looking for, a correction of cause. But nobody ever talks about cause. They only talk about symptoms. And that darn television tube just pounds it in our head every day. And let's face it, we have a country, and you can look this up for yourself, we have more doctors, we make and take more medicine, we have more hospitals than any other country in the world.
Absolutely.
That
And the
ought to
cost
make
is
us
ridiculous.
It ought to make us the healthiest country in the world.
Right.
But I tell you right now, go look on your phone, punch in Google, and punch in the overall health of the U.S. And let's see what it comes up. We'd hope with all of those things that we'd probably be in the top 10,
Right.
maybe number 1, maybe the top 20. You know what we rank?
Where?
35th.
Really?
We are the
35th?
35th healthiest nation in the world. Yet we have more doctors, more hospitals, and we do more research, and we make and take more medicine.
Right.
There's something wrong here. And the something wrong is very simply this. You can't continue to sedate the body trying to tell you that there is a problem. You got to deal with what's causing that problem.
So I recall before chiropractic care was not acknowledged, but now it is. So insurance does pay for it?
Tremendously. Yes.
Okay. All right. So give your contact information again, because I really want people to reach out to Dr. Greg. He has helped me tremendously. I fell off a ladder backwards. I had back surgery, and I'm only walking today is because of Dr. Greg. So he's great. Definitely, definitely. He puts the time in, and then also he
Thank you,
cares.
Sharon. Thank
So
you.
if you could give your contact information again.
734-525-8422.
And those who have migraines, you can call Dr. Greg. If you've had a stroke, you need to be adjusted because it has something to do with the spine. It's connected to the spine. And who else should be calling you other than just people who need to be adjusted? Because I think we all...
Well, I'll tell you what, Sharon, I don't think there's a problem that we could talk about that I haven't seen. So I would say no matter what your complaint is, no matter where you're hurting, how long it's been hurting, what you're doing, it doesn't really matter. You've had surgery, you haven't had surgery, it doesn't matter. Call us and let us talk to you. And if you call and ask for me personally, and I'll do my best. Now, I take care of an awful lot of people,
Yes,
but
you do.
I'll do my best to get back to you that same day, if not at that particular moment.
Okay, Lisa's not going to like that, but okay,
I
I
know.
hear you. I hear you. So can you give us any type of special? Can they come in the first time? What can you do for the people who are watching? Because I really want to encourage them to.
Yes,
I know
we
I'm putting
do.
you on the spot, but
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I want to make sure that people are coming out.
Yes. Well, as I said, we do the consultation, the examination is totally free of charge.
Okay. The consultation and the examination. Not the x-rays. The insurance pays for that.
Yeah,
But the
and
consultation.
if it doesn't, we'll work something out for you.
Okay.
I'll tell you this, Sharon, in all my years of practice, I have never, ever turned a patient away.
So we're about to close. So can you give your contact information again, please?
734-525-8422.
And please ask for Lisa maybe, because Dr. Greg, he's really busy. He has a lot of clients. So
Lisa is my daughter.
Yes.
And she's my boss.
she's your boss. Absolutely. I'm Sharon Dumas. This is Dr. Greg. You've been watching Expose Under the Sun, brought to you by the Detroit Native Sun newspaper. If you're interested in taking out an ad in the newspaper, please call Valerie Lockhart at 313-457-5944. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.